And on that note, we're recording.
Okay.
Okay, so
So welcome to the H Hour. First question. What is H Hour?
right, I'm glad you asked me. I did full disclosure. You asked me that just before we started recording. I said, ask me that when we start recording. It does not stand for Hugh Hour.
I know.
Okay. You do know.
I know it's a military term, but I
there
don't
we
know
go.
what
Okay.
it is
Okay,
for.
right. So do you know, have you heard of D-Day?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So D-Day and H Hour, they are, if you want for a better, they are, you can call them code phrases or phrases that are used to refer to a start time. Okay, so if you were to say, if I was to ask what time is H Hour, it means what time is the operation starting.
Okay.
What day is D-Day? What day is it starting? So, you it's a reference point. So if I was to say, okay, at H plus 2, which means 2 minutes after H hour, at H plus 2, I want you to flank left.
Okay.
It means I can it's easily refer to a point after
H
the start of a
plus,
battle.
yeah.
Similarly, H minus 2. Okay, 2 minutes before we start the battle, the first gun goes off or however it's being triggered, I want you to move into this position. You know, at D minus 3,
3 days.
the paratroopers are going to move to this airfield. D plus 2, the paratroopers will jump in to this area.
Okay.
Got it?
Yeah.
H hour. Okay, cool. I am very glad you're here. Very glad you're here, Harry. Thank you very much, especially for giving me time when you're over here relaxing in the UK, in your long johns.
It's cold. It's cold over here.
You are a British native wearing long johns over here in the winter, and your wife, who is a warm country native, is not wearing long johns. What's going on?
So she's better with the cold than me, and I'm better with the hot than her, believe it or not, which is completely bizarre. So I used to be really good with the cold. I used to work out in the cold, and I'd sleep with my window open even in winter. And then I caught a really bad form of food poisoning called compactor bile. Had internal bleeding, hospitalized for 2 weeks, and ever since that, I can't cope with the cold. So I don't know what happened, but it screwed me up. So.
My God, that is shocking. Yeah, good to have you here. And the icebreaker was already was a good insight into some of the things you've been involved. Well, what would you describe? How would you describe yourself? How would you describe your mental, not mental state, but your mentality now compared to before when you were a drug addict?
Dependable. I'd say it's the same, but today I'm just dependable. Yeah, I have a tremendous willpower. I've always had a tremendous willpower, as you have to start an industry on another continent that you've never been in before. You generally have to be pretty determined. And I was always pretty determined before, but my addiction just got in the way. What I've actually learned is I feel that willpower held me back because I'm so strong willpowered. I had such a belief that I could beat alcoholism, I could beat addiction by myself for so long. I think it held me back for years. This belief that I could beat it, this belief that I'm not going to lose, I will beat this.
When you were addicted?
Yeah. And my experience is very few do it alone. And to be honest, the very few, the 1 in 100 that do, they miss out on some of the real benefits of doing it with other people, doing it with a group, or learning the things you learn through working on yourself with other people.
Was it a belief that you could beat it, or was saying to yourself that you believed you could beat it an excuse not to go seeking help elsewhere?
No, I believed I could beat it. Yeah, 100%.
What was the addiction?
Well, what isn't the addiction? It started with weed because my uncle's dead from alcoholism. My mum's 35 years sober, 34 years sober, 35 years in February. And so I never really wanted to drink. I never planned to drink. But I started smoking weed from an early age, and I did that obsessively. Then I didn't really start the drinking and drug taking, harder drugs, until I gave up smoking weed. But I think when I look back, and even according to my mum, I was always had addictive behavior. My mum reckoned she was telling people that I was an addict from the age of 4 years old. And she could see, and looking back, my behavior was just obsessive. Anything.
Give me an example.
Sports, video games, chocolate. Geez, I just obsess over anything, and get lost in things, get lost in video games, couldn't wait for anything, impatient, instant gratification, needed it now, couldn't wait. Although my parents did make me wait for a lot of stuff, I always, if I could get it early, I'd find a way. I just impatient. Yeah, I'd say, well, she wasn't wrong, because the proof's in the pudding a few years later. Yeah, her statements are true, and she grew up with alcoholics, with addicts. She often says I'm very much like her brother. So he died from alcoholism. Her dad was an alcoholic. She's an alcoholic. She spent 35 years working in support groups with alcoholics. So
if you're aware of the potential sort of highly sensitive addictive genes, if you want to say that, within you and your family, you mentioned the alcoholism. How did that not help when you became addicted to other things? Did not help you avoid, drugs, for example?
Yeah, because, well, I didn't know it at the time. She knew it. I didn't know it. For me, it was, I've come to learn, and I'm not too overly worried about analysing it, because I don't think it really helps me to look at it. I see some people look at reasons and maybe they can find a cure for themselves. For me, I've just accepted I am the way I am and come to be grateful for it. But, you couldn't have told me at that age not to smoke weed or not to drink or not to do other stuff, because I wanted to do that stuff and I didn't believe I had a problem. And really, it was giving me something. So
what was it giving you?
Ease and comfort. The best thing I found is it helped me to switch my head off, because I didn't like myself. As I said in the introduction, I didn't like myself ever since in school. Yeah. Wasn't good at any sports.
I wanted to ask you about that. So what kind of a person were you when you were a kid at school?
Well, I know what I felt like. Wasn't good at sports, wasn't good at any subject except for maths. Didn't feel good looking, didn't feel popular enough. So basically, my whole school life, I felt less than, not cool enough, not popular enough, not good at any sports. Like literally the guy picked last in just about every sport, till the point I could bunk off school and go smoking or smoking weed instead of going to PE. Basically, wasn't good at any subject except for maths, which doesn't make you cool. So, and I look back, I was probably more popular than I thought. I think school's quite hard when you're young. You don't really know, and adulthood's hard in different ways, but you don't really know much about life when you're a kid, and you don't realize, like, actually you kind of find your place in life a bit later, and it doesn't really matter about these cliques or groups or whether you're hanging about with the cool kids and stuff.
Yeah, I don't think you don't find your place in life, do you? Your perception of yourself changes, but the unfortunate thing is, for a lot of people, it doesn't change in a good way. I would say I was kind of similar to you in school, but I was lucky. I was decent at the sporty things I was doing. I was decent at. I was lucky. I had that, I think, but I didn't enjoy it for all the reasons you said there. It's kind of the same thing. I had real low self-esteem, real low self-ego, low self-confidence. I didn't think a lot of myself. And I think probably that was partly to do with, how I perceived myself in relation to my peer group. I wasn't, and also a massive mop of real super ginger hair, not wearing the latest trendy clothes and trainers because simply couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
And all of those things. I think we definitely underestimate just how much of an impact school has on our kids. I think we underestimate because all kids go through school. We all did it, so we kind of pay a little bit of lip service to it, I think. a little bit of lip service, you know. But the pressures are huge back then. They must be almost unbearable these days. I've got kids, you know, and they're coming towards the end of school now. It must be unbearable now, and girls as well. No, I don't know. How did you get over that when you left school then? Those feelings of inadequacy?
I don't think they really left me till my nervous breakdown, 5 years sober, because I didn't realize how driven I was.
How long ago was that?
2017, yeah. Because I didn't realize how driven I was till then. So when my best friend died, we ended up doing a recovery tool from the 12-step recovery program. We did a thing called an inventory, or step 4 on my best friend's death, and it came to look at things.
What was his name? Andrew, was it?
Scott. Yeah.
And Scott co-founded Bali Beginnings with you?
He did. Okay. Yeah. And we came to look at things like, well, why was I so driven? Why did I follow him so blindly and not question anything he said? Why was I also trying to run 2 businesses at the same time as running a rehab? Although I wasn't running a rehab, to be fair, I was just an investor before Scott died. And I came to look at it all, and I came to realize, well, what drives you? Is it money? No, finance doesn't drive me. So what really drives you? And as we dug deeper and deeper, it was success. I need to be a success. I need to be seen as a success. Why do you need to be seen as a success? Because there's a little boy in there who feels worthless, and if you see me as a success, maybe you'll like me, you know. So it was like my validation. If you think I'm something, I am something. So I didn't realize that out till 5 years sober, till I had a nervous breakdown, driven from chasing too many things and not allowing space for life to happen. Yeah, I did get a bit unlucky with some big life stuff, but that is life. Life isn't fair, you know. So
how did you? Can I ask you a question? Because that process, I think most people will benefit from that process of trying to understand why they are who they are, why they're motivated to do what they do, or think what they think, or feel what they feel. But it's probably a pretty scary thing to undertake for most people. I don't like. I like the idea of doing that for myself. What you just said, but. How did you go through that process? I mean, literally, how did you do it?
Yeah, I was very blessed to join some support groups for alcohol and drugs, and the premise of them is it's not really about the alcohol and drugs like the rehab. It's about what in life isn't working for you. So what can we change that isn't working to make you better? And in particular, okay, we can't change the outside world. We can't change people, places, or things. We can't stop people hurting us or wronging us, or life being unfair, or volcanoes, or best friends relapsing, or there's a lot we can't change. We're not in control of that. But what are we in control of? Our reaction to it, how we handle it, how we react, what we learn from it. So I guess I was lucky. I was very desperate. My friend did a TED talk on the gift of desperation. I had this gift of desperation. I was just so desperate and broken, wanting change. I was willing.
Scott did that talk?
No, my another friend, Ian Thomas, the gift of desperation. I have to recommend. He does a podcast with you. He's amazing.
Where's he
me. He has a van, so he lives around the country. He has properties as well, but he lives around the country.
Is it this country?
Yeah.
Ooh, okay, we'll connect them after that. Sorry, right, sorry. Yeah.
And I was just so desperate from years of addiction. I was willing to do anything. So they said, here, do these things. Look at your life, look at your behaviors, find out, you know, what's driving you underneath and change them. And I was just so desperate for change. I was ready to do anything. And when I got a taste of that change, I just wanted to chase it further, possibly obsessively in some ways. You know, it's not all bad in some ways being an addict. There are some good aspects, you know, it doesn't always serve us, but I can be a beast, you know, when I want to with some things. I can switch something on. The same way I can chase, it's probably some ADHD tendencies, but the same way I can chase drugs, you know, if I can turn that to a force for good, so chasing improvement, then I can do. I've done a lot of work in myself. It all came from being desperate, but that desperation, and then open the door a crack into what life can be if I do things like counseling, if I work on myself, trauma workshops, hosts of other things.
It sounds to me like you're describing yourself as an addict, as a state. So not an addict of alcohol, not an addict of drugs. It sounds like you describe yourself as an addict, and that is a state of mind or a condition. Am I right in what I'm saying there?
Yeah, I guess so. Because
you were talking about it there as if it's a current state. Like you were saying, I'm an addict. I can turn that into beast mode, basically. Am I explaining that fairly?
Yeah, I
really
would say
interesting.
that.
Okay.
Yeah, and again, it comes to, I think, what we talked about it's really about the mental health. It's not about the substance. That's almost like the solution. And what I've come to realize is my problem was predominantly low self-worth. My solution was alcohol and drugs because it helped me forget. I could switch my head off for a bit. From the moment I started smoking weed in school, I didn't have to remember being this kid who wasn't good at anything. I could bunk off school, hang around with older people, cooler people. Suddenly I didn't have to be me anymore. I didn't have to be living this life I didn't like. And yeah, so the alcohol and drugs are just a solution. And it's different for different people. My mum, it was bad social anxiety. She couldn't socialize without being topped up with something. Like medicine for other people, it's same severe anxiety maybe, and it's their solution to get through life. So often actually the alcohol or drugs is a solution for what's underneath. And the alcohol or drugs give us that. It's like a debt collector. It gives you something at first, and quite often it gives you something towards the end. But like a debt collector, it starts taking. So it's like, here, you want to be a bit more confident in the pub. Here, have a pint. There you go. Suddenly I'm a few inches taller and funnier, and I'm easier to chat with women and a bit more gobby with the big lads in the pub and stuff, and just feel a bit more. And or I forget, that's kind of what alcohol or drugs gives at first. And then there comes a point, if you're like me, it stops giving like a debt collector and it goes, right, now it's my turn to take, what am I going to take first? For me, probably the first thing it took was some jobs, not turning up on a Monday. Lost your job, took my driving license. I say took my driving license. I got banned for drink driving, so which I'm not proud of. That's something I guess also it took from me, if we're looking at this debt collector perspective, took relationships, took friendships, took opportunities, the amount of good opportunities I got offered, and I'd mess them up with alcohol. Took other jobs, took my happiness, took my health, really, to a lesser extent, to my uncle's extent, it took his life, So it's like a debt collector. At first it gives you something and helps you, and then slowly it starts taking more and more and more. It's a great analogy I love. If you're not, how do I know if I'm an alcoholic, or how do I know if I'm an addict? If it's costing you more than money, you're probably an addict. With me, it cost me friendships, relationships, jobs, opportunity, careers, literally careers, license. Geez, it cost me so much more than money. And then my mental health. But I didn't realize, because it was also the only thing. It's like a vicious cycle. The more you dislike yourself, the more you want to block it out. The more you block it out with alcohol and drugs, the more things go wrong, the more you dislike yourself. It's a really horrible cycle to be in.
Yeah, and your logic and reason starts to get skewed as well in those situations. So you're not even receiving the world in a normal way anymore, or yourself in a normal way. It all just goes sort of pear-shaped. How did you realize that you had an issue?
So I first realized I had an issue at the age of 19. So when I was younger, 14, 15, 16, and I was working from the age of 14, it didn't really seem like much of a problem, losing a job as a labourer on a building site. Okay, losing the license sucked a bit. seemed like just a bit of fun, a bit stupid, okay, I haven't paid rent again, but I'll pay it next time, it's no big deal. But by the time you're 19, and it's quite clear to me what it's costing me. It's cost me a few opportunities, a couple of friendships, my license. It was really like, okay, I want to change this. I don't want to.
You just on the smash constantly.
No, I was quite a lot actually. yeah. It changed more as I got older. I try and do it less and less as I got older, so it become more every 2 or 3 days as I got older, because I'd be right, I'm not doing this again, okay, I'll do that. But I remember even at the age of 19, me and my best mate did a night school in bricklaying just to keep us out the pub on a Thursday night. And I look back now, we did it, well, because we wanted to do a night school in bricklaying, but also to keep us out the pub on a Friday night, on a Thursday night,
Because your willpower wasn't enough.
Willpower doesn't work with alcohol or drugs. Yeah, for whatever reason. And I have no doubt about my willpower. Almost crazy levels of willpower. I mean, when I started the rehab, or when I did with Scott, I'd never stepped foot in a rehab. I'd never even been in a rehab, like not as a guest, not as a visitor, not as anything. And I started it, and then he died, the volcano shut us down, I started it again, and then did very well for a year. Headlined a talk on ethics in the industry because of some of the changes we were making at a conference, changes we were making in the industry. COVID shut us down, started again. I don't give up, I don't quit. I can be beaten, that's wrong. I just don't give up. I have no doubt about my willpower, but I just know when it comes to alcohol and drugs, willpower does not count for anything. And like I say, I think it held me back because I was so determined that I could beat it. And I had this kind of inner fighter spirit. I'm not going to back down. I'm going to beat it. I feel like that really held me back for years and stopped me from surrendering for years, really.
How many years was it before you did stop?
6 years of trying before I did stop.
From 19?
Yeah, 19 to 25. 6 years. And we're talking basically daily trying to stop. Maybe use the next day and drink. I'd always convince myself I'm not going to drink. I'll just have a couple. And then as soon as I get a taste of it, it's like a switch. I can't control what happens next until it's 6:30 in the morning. I'm going, damn, I can't believe I did that again. And then I'm not going to drink. Maybe last a day, not going to drink. Maybe 2 days. Bam, I'll just have a couple. This time it will just be a couple. And yeah.
I know exactly what you mean. There are people, I can guarantee you, there are people listening to this now, watching this now and thinking, not enough willpower. And it's, as you said, like true addiction. It will take your willpower and throw out the fucking window. It's like the kryptonite willpower. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And as I mentioned earlier on, like it changes your logic, it skews your mind, it makes you weaker in some aspects, it makes you stronger in other aspects. But in ways that are used negatively by you. Your brain tricks you into things. And you probably experience a similar thing. You end up having this dialogue with yourself. When you're at that stage, you have this dialogue with yourself where you convince yourself nothing, gonna have nothing, and then within milliseconds the other voice is saying, well, just want to take the edge off, get you through a day because you feel like shit. And then one isn't one, and then it turns into the second and the third, and then the next day you're hating yourself again, and you manage 2 or 3 days maybe, but you're only managing it because you're distracting yourself with something else that takes you away from it. And as soon as you're loose again, it comes back in. It's addiction, I think, is such a difficult thing to describe to people who have never experienced it, because it can sound trivial, but it it is the level of control addiction can assert on someone's mind is unbelievable. Even with case in point, the most strongest willpower people, it's unbelievable. It's almost something I wish people could sort of experience risk-free for like a millisecond. There you go. What does that feel like? It's fucking horrendous.
Yeah, risk-free. I guess if it is risk-free, yeah, it's like
well, it's not possible to do it risk-free, is it? I'm just hypothetically speaking.
Yeah, so I could tell people what a book tells me it's like to be pregnant, or a doctor could have a guess at what it's like to be pregnant. But unless you're a woman who's gone through pregnancy, you can never really know what it's like. And even then, one pregnancy isn't the same as another. So yeah, and I mean, you want willpower. After the nervous breakdown, I sold my house to clear most of the debt and still had 50,000 of debt left on me and my wife's name, just to start again and go reopen a rehab on a foreign continent 7,000 miles away by myself against the advice of everyone.
So you were living in the UK when you had the breakdown. Can I ask, when did you meet Scott?
2012.
Okay. How old were you?
25.
25.
Yeah.
How did you meet him?
In recovery groups, yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I remember going to this recovery group and I was 4 days sober.
The first 4 days sober ever?
No. Okay. It was, I'd been to recovery groups before and got a month sober, which was the longest I had been sober when I was 23. Since I was 14 years old. But I remember going back out of desperation. I was convinced they wouldn't work again, but I was just so desperate. I gave them a go. I remember being 4 days sober the day before my other uncle died. And everyone was happy to see me and celebrated, and it was kind of surreal because I wasn't used to people being happy to see me. Everywhere I went, no one was happy to see me.
Because you're the end. Always a problem.
Yeah, in one way or another, or I always let people down. My family loved me, but they didn't like me. I never paid rent. I lied constantly. I borrowed money and didn't pay it back. Drink driving, other things. Occasionally the police turning up. Occasionally me in hospital. It wasn't, Went down the shops, I owed the money, went in the pub. In the younger days, I'd probably been in some trouble or owed the money. In fact, one of my solutions the last 2 years was just to lock myself in my room. Because if I locked myself in my room, I kind of halved the consequences. Because I didn't feel like I had an alcohol problem. I didn't want to give up the alcohol. I just didn't want the consequences anymore. I didn't want to keep losing my job or letting people down or borrowing money and running up debt or lying to people. I didn't want these things, So I just locked myself in my room, really. The only problem with that is the consequence it came with was deep loneliness and depression.
What do you mean you lock yourself in your room?
No, metaphorically, I just stay in my room trying not to go out because whenever I went out, I got in trouble.
Were you living with your parents?
Yeah. So at least if I stayed at home in my room, I went to work. When I went to work, I'd come back. By then I was running my own, I was working as an electrician at the start of my business, working by myself. So I'd go to work, then just come home and try not to drink. That was basically my life. Work, hopefully, and then come home and try not to drink or take drugs. That was my life for the last 2 years. Sit in, because when I went out, I always got in trouble. I always drank. I always used.
Was there anything else? Was nothing else that could scratch the itch? Because a lot of people turn to, or can turn to, or find that like fitness or some other random thing, random activity can sort of replace the be a sticking plaster over the issues. But there was nothing.
Interesting.
Video games is another one.
Yeah, which can be unhealthy, but I'd say it's better than
alcohol
things. And yeah, I mean, fitness can be an addiction. The danger with that, I guess, is if you get an injury, you know, if your whole support's on one thing, what happens when you're injured? So that is one. So can the support groups. I've got some people I'd say are addicted to going to some of the support groups, go 7 days a week. I'd say it's a damn sight better than drinking or using drugs. So, you know, I'm all for it.
Is it being addicted to the support group though? Is it wanting to be in a community where they feel safe and welcome and loved?
Good question. I would say both can happen. So I've seen some people forgo life for recovery groups. So, you know, they don't go out, they just go to a recovery group every day, don't work, don't engage in life, and they almost don't engage in life, I'd say. So they engage in this one little aspect. But for me, it's about whole life. It's about a whole structure. Recovery should be kind of a bridge to normal living. It should enable us to live as normal a life as I can as an addict. It's an important tool. And it's very different at the start. The things I had to do at the start, you know, I had to put a lot more effort in than I do today. I guess it's kind of like fitness. If you're really unfit, you have to put a lot more effort in to get there. Then maintaining it's a lot simpler. You can just go to the gym 2 or 3 times a week and, you know, eat healthily 5 or 6 times a week. You're going to maintain quite well. But the first, you need to put a lot of effort in. So I think it's really important when you first get into recovery, if you're having problems, just to go all in. You know, you really need a comprehensive solution. You really need comprehensive support. Then as you go after, recovery should be a tool, like I say, to give us the life we want, you know, to be able to go out and do normal things or go out and meet people without the worry of drinking and using and causing carnage, or, you know, secret drinking at the bar and then coming home and drinking a lot more after the party, so to speak, or, you know, or being able to save money to go on holiday or do normal things, or all the things I just couldn't do when I was drinking or using.
It's when you. I'm not sure if you've given this any thought, or you probably have, but that's an incredibly young age to be captured by that state, as in, you know, alcohol addiction and other things, and then to realize and then start the journey out of it. You know, most people, I'm hypothesizing, you probably know better than me. Most people get into the recovery stage, or they're like the critical danger stage of an addiction later in life, right? Would that be fair to say?
I would say, in my opinion, I'm lucky I got into harder drugs. So Coke, interestingly, was another solution for me, because when I go out and drink, I get in a lot of trouble. I do a lot of stupid stuff when I'm drunk. You know, in alcohol's defense, I do some stupid stuff sober, but they're a lot less. You know, when I'm drunk, I can be a real idiot, and I drink like a fish, and I can't handle it like a fish. But so cocaine for me was a solution. You know, I could drink alcohol and take a line of coke or something, and I wouldn't do all the stupid stuff. I wouldn't end up fighting with a bouncer or end up in hospital.
Is that because it would sober you up somewhat?
Keeps you kind of sober, yeah. And there were other benefits, like being a lot more paranoid, which isn't necessarily good. But if it stops me going and fighting a bouncer, then that's not a bad thing. Or if it stops me drink driving because I'm worried.
But the coke would make you paranoid.
Yeah.
I thought it increases confidence.
I don't know. I mean, I was taking a lot, so yeah. I don't think that helps. See, people always say I'm quite hyper.
People do take it as because people, you know, alcohol is you could describe it as a social lubricant or something. You know,
yeah.
But you could say the same for coke. There are a lot of people that take coke because of confidence issues.
Not how I take it though. Like. I mean, I don't really like sharing war stories, but we'd do a gram in the first line. You know, we didn't do small amounts. And yeah, a lot of people often say, I would hate to see you on drugs. You know, when I get going, I can be a bit bouncing all over the place, a bit nutty, in the nice sense. But actually, I used to take so many drugs that just used to like bellow me down, you know, because I'd take so much. You know, I didn't take small amounts. So I guess if people can do it socially, then maybe that's the case. I just can't do things socially. I can't do things normally. I can't do things by halves. I can't. Yeah, I just have this button in me. As soon as I consume something, this button goes off, and I can't stop it, even when I want to. You know, I remember once. This was actually on speed. One regatta. We've been up for 2 days, and my friend, some guy came around with some speed, and I really didn't want to take it. And I just remember my friend saying, "Should we do another one?" And I kept saying, "No, let's not, let's not." They'd chop it up, and they'd be there.
Oh, sorry, what was it? Coke.
Speed. This
So,
is
speed.
speed.
Sorry, speed. Right. Sorry.
Yeah, I just couldn't not do it, and I'd do it, and it'd feel like 5 minutes later he's going, "Shall we do another one?" And I'm like, "No, let's wait a bit. Let's wait half an hour. Let's wait an hour." And they'd chop it up, and I just couldn't not do it, even though I didn't want to. Even though I was trying to tell him, let's wait, and this went on for hours. Let's not do it now. But as soon as it's there, I can't not do it, even when I don't want to. And I remember right towards the end, so fed up of my life, being in my room, had a pack of Stellas, and I just got a couple of grams of Coke, and I was chopping up the first one, and
Just
I
at
remember,
home. Just at home, doing it yourself.
yeah, well, I didn't get in trouble if I did it at home, so I got in a lot less trouble. I didn't drink drive. I spent less. I could manage not to drink a day or two. But I just remember looking at it and just crying and just like, don't do this, don't do this. Literally just not wanting to do it so badly and crying because I knew I was going to do it, even though that every part of me didn't want to do it. But I just couldn't not. I could not not.
Crazy.
Oh.
Crazy. Horrendous. Do you think that addiction is predominantly a genetic predisposition for people?
You are 4 times more likely to suffer if it is in your family.
If it's hereditary, yeah.
But I know loads of people that don't have any family history that are, and loads of people that don't. So, yeah, I had an interesting thing the other day. We were talking in a recovery group about things to be grateful for. Guy was like, "I'm grateful my sister's not this way." And it made me think, and I reflected on it. And in some ways, I have a sister. She's very well adjusted, quite normal, which in some ways I'm very happy about. And I'm happy it was me and not her who struggled with this. On the flip side of that, you know, what I have got from walking this journey, I honestly feel I'm in such a better position than had I not. So, you know, at the same time, kind of means she may never get the desperation that I had to work on myself and look at myself and change everything. I've changed everything down this path, changed my mind, changed my health, changed my job. This is fundamentally changed every part of me for the better. And I don't think my life would be as good as it is today had I not had this. So it's kind of bittersweet in some ways. I feel like I'm also stopping other people, you know. What if she had been this one and had got sober and got to experience the things I'd experienced? Then she would have been lucky instead of unlucky. But the truth is, most people who suffer from addiction don't. Unfortunately, most people will struggle. Very few get the solution, which is really sad. I do think it's getting better with awareness. Yeah, I think to answer your question a bit earlier, I think the demographic's getting younger with awareness as well. I think a lot more young people are coming in. The reason why I think hard drugs help, they brought me down so much quicker. Then I tend to see people with just alcohol problems come into recovery later and into the rehab a lot later than people with drug issues.
Why do you think that is?
I think a number of factors, like, I mean, the financial burden. I could blow £150 on coke in an hour if I really wanted to. I'll make it last probably the night. I can drink 150 quid's worth of beer. Even in most bars, I couldn't spend that on drink, you know. I just physically couldn't, because I'd pass out before I drunk that level. That's where somewhere like Mayfair, you know, for £30 a drink, realistically, I just couldn't drink the debt I was getting in. I couldn't get myself in the same level of trouble as I did with drugs. And then there's the shame. Alcohol, kind of like, well, not kind of like workaholism, but alcohol is a lot more socially accepted. You know, I can't go around telling people I snort loads of coke, or sneaking down back alleys to buy it, or driving. You know, if you drive home from the off license, you got nothing to worry about. It took me a year sober to stop being worried when I saw a police car. Like a year sober of every time I see a police car, oh shit, oh wait, no, I'm sober now. It's okay. I haven't got anything on me anymore. You know, I'm not gonna still be over the limit from the night before. You know, there are lots of things, the shame and the guilt that come with illegal drugs you don't get with alcohol.
Yeah, I mean the alcohol social acceptance, that's never going to change. I don't see a massive issue at the moment. What the issue has been in the past is it was socially unacceptable to not drink.
Yeah,
it's the opposite, but they're not the same, right? And it's becoming more socially acceptable now to not drink or drink zero alcohol stuff.
I think it's cool now. It's almost
you reckon?
Cooler. Yeah.
Don't know about that. So. Not in my circles.
I think with the younger generation, we're just not the younger generation anymore. Sorry if that hurts.
Yeah, maybe cool. I mean, yeah, I know what you mean. I'll buy a zero alcohol stuff at home, and my daughters will have it. My daughter, for clarity, they're not like 4 years old, they're 16 and 19, and they won't turn their nose up at it. And I maybe think if that was 20 years ago and it was me at 19 years old, I'm like, zero alcohol? What the fuck are you talking about, Dad? Get it away from me.
Yeah, yeah.
But then at that point, my dad was an alcoholic at that point, so maybe I would have been double like, what the fuck? But yeah, it's becoming more socially acceptable to not go out and not drink, or to drink zero alcohol. You know, do you know what's interesting? Actually, thinking about it, maybe or maybe not. It would get to the stage where alcohol is less socially acceptable in the same kind of way. I'm not advocating for that. Maybe I should, but in the same kind of way that smoking now, I would say that is much less socially acceptable now. It's because most people don't smoke now. I think most people don't smoke. And people who smoke, you know, there are times occasionally where I'll have a cigarette, right? Occasionally. I never smoked for any length of time. I smoked for maybe 4 or 5 years, tops, in one go. You know, where I was properly smoking, maybe 4 or 5 years. But if I go and have a cigarette now or smoke at something, at an event or something, I will sneak out to do it because I don't want to be seen to be smoking. Okay. And when I come back in, I'm conscious of smelling like smoke. Yeah, and I'm thinking that because most people don't smoke these days. I know how smelly it is on people because I am not a smoker now. You know, once in a blue moon, I'll have one, like, you know. But I remember being younger when I stopped smoking. I'd be able to smell it on my parents when they would walk into the room. Oh, I could smell it from 5 meters away. Jesus,
yeah,
man, is that what I used to smell like? You know, so maybe alcohol could become that way, where you can still do it if you wanna, but it's less socially acceptable. Then again,
it's too ingrained for that at the minute.
Yeah, and it would trash a whole industry, wouldn't it?
Smoking doesn't visibly give us as much, whereas alcohol kind of gives you something more. You don't smoke a cigarette and, you know, kind of walk back into a pub. Dutch courage.
Of course,
You know, you don't smoke a cigarette just before a date and think, right, I'm ready now, you know.
So alcohol has its benefits for a lot of people.
Definitely.
You know, a lot of people.
Yeah, I'm not against alcohol. I'm not against anything. I just think in moderation, I just learned I can't do it in moderation. And believe me, I've tried. I've tried.
What do you think about the legalization of drugs in general?
I don't often like talking about this too much because I run a rehab, but but I'm going to anyway. Portugal decriminalized drugs in 2001 and they haven't looked back. There are some things they need to work on in the policy now because it's over 20 years old now. But for instance, their overdose, and they had a massive heroin problem, their overdose rates went from well above the European average to 11 times less than the European average. And they basically spent the money that they were spending on locking people up on rehabs and treatment. And decriminalizing means people aren't labeled as a criminal, don't have criminal histories, can get back into work easier and be better functioning members of society. So
there are formal, efficient pathways to rehabilitation. There are the drugs that are available are controlled. The quality is verifiable. There's much less ill health with it. I interviewed a guy called it was a couple of years ago now. A guy called Neil Woods, and Neil Woods is an ex-British police officer who used to be an undercover police officer for a period.
Probably no.
Yeah, and I went into that interview, and the reason I wanted to talk to him is he staunchly believed in the decriminalization of drugs, and I went into that interview thinking that's a crazy idea. No, and I came out of the interview, the conversation with him, I was completely, I thought the opposite for many of the reasons you just talked about. He really articulated the case for decriminalization in a fascinating and very convincing way, and I still think that now, actually, decriminalization.
I would be so for me, if what we were doing was working, I would have a different stance. But what we're doing is not working. Rise of coke use and stuff is increasing. It's not decreasing. Seems to be the odd kids out these days, are younger people, 18 to 25, are the ones who haven't done it rather than the ones who have, And so if the war on drugs was working, I'd probably be for that. But 60 years has shown that plan hasn't worked. So what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing again and again, expecting a different result. And you look at Portugal's model, I was anti it till I looked into what Portugal has done. And it needs refinement, it needs work, but it doesn't make sense to keep doing something that's broken. Prohibition has proven time and time again to increase use. You look at prohibition of alcohol in America, it increased use. You got prohibition of weed in Amsterdam. It's legal. Less of the population smoke weed in Amsterdam than they do in the UK. Less of the population.
What, by percentage?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, less of the population take hard drugs than they did in the UK. Certainly up until recently. Prohibition doesn't seem to work. It seems to increase use. And like you said, it has all the negative consequences. We give a lot of money to criminals. Then while I'm not sure the money... I'm not sure there's any system that works, and I guess part of it is an experiment, a social experiment. Then you look at some of the things places like California have done with the money they've made from legalizing weed. If it's a choice of, okay, this isn't working, we're giving all the money to criminals, or this isn't working, let's give the money to the government who desperately need money.
Yeah, the thing is with weed is that it's relatively harmless, relevant. Let me finish the sentence.
Yeah, sorry.
Relative to cocaine, heroin, crystal meth, those things, right? So, I think, if you were to get if you were to get an area in the UK, like now that decided to test out, I don't know, legalization of weed or legalization of all drugs, it wouldn't work in isolation as an experiment, I don't think, because the harder version of those drugs would be available just by driving 20 miles across the border and going to another dealer that you know. So, you'd have to sort of you'd actually introduce a blanket policy across the nation to test it out, or just go balls in and just legalize it all and let the chips fall where they may. But like you're saying, there are great case studies at the moment in existence that have been going for years and decades. Portugal, Amsterdam, which demonstrate. And Amsterdam is not that far different a culture from our own. You could argue Portugal's very different, but I'm struggling to see these days the argument against legalizing drugs here. It doesn't make sense to me that we still outlaw it. You mentioned the prohibition of alcohol in America, and I was thinking as you were saying that, what would happen here if we prohibited alcohol? It'd be a nightmare. More people would be dying from alcohol issue, alcohol related issues. There'd be less control over the quality of the product in the street. It'd be getting done illegally. There'd be more fucking criminals. We would have a net bad effect, I think. Bad effect.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if decriminalizing everything is the way. I just know that what we are doing isn't working. So, why, to use a bad expression, why flog a dead horse? Change something. What have we got to lose by trying something different? Maybe that isn't a full step of decriminalizing, but what we're doing isn't serving us, isn't serving society, isn't serving this generation, the next generation, or any generation, So,
yeah. What was you mentioned you met Scott in rehab, in your first rehab. What was your first impression of Scott when you met him?
Circles, yeah.
Oh, sorry, not rehab, recovery. I apologize. Yeah.
I was pissed off. So, like I said,
you pissed off with him.
Yeah, 4 days, 4 days sober. So we were 1 day apart. I was 4 days sober first week, and I went back the next week, 11 days sober, and it was like, yeah, it goes round. I'm 11 days sober. Everyone was grateful. And then we went round the room and someone goes, I'm 10 days sober. And I thought, you bastard, you've stolen my thunder. You've taken it from me.
Newest bloke now.
Yeah. I was like, yeah. So we didn't really connect for about 6 months and properly.
Did you genuinely dislike him for that?
No, I didn't really know who it was then. It was just this person. I didn't really put it. It was just this 10. It was more than 10 days. Yeah, it was almost like a guy called Simon Sinek speaks about. The role we take in. Yeah. The role we take in life. Things are not meant for us, therefore the role we take in life. I don't really dislike him. I dislike the person that was a day less sober than me, basically. I dislike the new person. So it could have been anyone. It wasn't him per se. But yeah, we didn't really connect till about 6 months sober, really. Yeah, we went to a really quiet few support groups, and it was just mainly 3 or 4 people, and over the weeks I just got to know him more and more, and we connected more and more. And
so what was his background?
He was a psychologist, hence rehab. So he was a bit older. He died at 42.
He was a psychologist in recovery.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
He used to work in Australia in a rehab, come home and smoke crystal meth, dream of owning his own rehab.
My God.
Yeah.
Did he ever talk about that sort of paradoxical nature to it, if that's the right word? Like, how would he explain that to you? I was like, why couldn't he understand what was going on with him and fix it himself?
It's different when you look at things. So one of the reasons counseling's so good is it's an impartial, unbiased person who isn't emotionally attached in the situation. So you could tell me stuff about your life and I can look at it and
objectively,
not advise, but objectively, I'm not emotionally tangled, this and that. I can give you an honest outside perspective. If you're caught up in it, you almost can't see the wood for the trees, and certainly don't want to believe you're necessarily an addict or an alcoholic. I didn't think I was an addict for a few years of taking coke. It wasn't, and I probably would have avoided using that term till I got into recovery, because it wasn't really something you want to be associated with, far from it. So, I'm not an addict, I just like taking a bit of coke at the weekends, you don't really know until you're too far in that you are that. And even then, some people can't admit that. And that's okay. Denial is a coping mechanism. So denial is a coping mechanism designed to protect us from things.
Explain that.
So with alcohol, like I said, alcohol serves us in a way. For some people, it helps them with social anxiety. For me, it helped me forget. So denial of the fact I was an alcoholic. No, I'm not an alcoholic. It's enabling me to protect this thing that helps me forget, that gives me something. So I'm trying to protect that thing that's giving me something. If I admit I'm an alcoholic, then I got a problem with this thing. I should give up this thing. Then what am I going to do with my low self-worth? What am I going to do with my social anxiety? What am I going to do with the fact I got to sit in this dysfunctional relationship, or whatever it may be? The fact some other guy's raising my daughter, or, whatever it may be for different people, they got to sit with it. And
I've never thought of denial of an addiction in that way. That's, yeah, okay, interesting. Makes sense. Yeah, I've always thought of it as, someone denying they're addicted to something is them just not wanting to own up that they're weak or they're inadequate at
that
just
can be
handling
it.
life.
That's protecting them from something, protecting them from a feeling of weakness. Same as me, I was strong. That's why I didn't reach out for help. I'm strong. I'm tough. I can do this. That's like, there's a great psychologist, Carl Jung. He speaks of the shadow and shadow work. A shadow is what lurks beneath, and actually what's up front can be the opposite of that. So for me, I have this tremendous willpower, this tremendous drive, and now I didn't realize till I got into recovery and had this nervous breakdown, even later, that I can have the opposite. I can have an uber confidence. I remember after COVID, reopening the rehab and doing a trauma workshop actually on that, and saying, I don't understand why 90% of me is super confident. I tell myself, like, we were really successful before. We treated 54 patients in a year before COVID shut us down. We were asked to give talks at conferences, on ethics in the industry, when we hadn't even been open a year.
Why is that? So why? Do you want to talk about that now, or do you want to talk about that later?
Let's keep to one thing for now.
Okay.
So that is my overconfidence, and that protects me from the shadow. And the shadow is, what if I'm not good enough? What if I fail? What if I let everyone down? And that's where denial can be the same, admitting weakness. That is admitting this part of me that I don't want to acknowledge. I want to protect myself from that part of me that I feel is weak, that isn't big enough, that isn't strong enough, that can't cope. I need to protect myself from that bit, because embracing that bit is hard. Who really wants to admit they're weak? Who really wants to admit true failure? I've come to learn through recovery, failure is not a bad thing, as long as we learn lessons from it. In fact, I'd say in some ways it's a good thing, depending on the failure. In fact, I'd say if you're willing to learn the lessons, most failures are good, but to do them, you have to admit you're weak. It's okay to be weak. It's okay to be vulnerable. I guess there's a different... Vulnerability is not weakness. Vulnerability is strength. Admitting there are some things you're not good at can be a tremendous strength, or you need help with, or you're not coping.
Definitely need you to explain that more. So vulnerability is not weakness. It's not. Explain that more.
It's me holding everything in when my best friend died, and trying to put a brave face on it and try and overwork and laugh and joke, led to me having a nervous breakdown. The opposite, it's easy for me, and this is from my perspective, it's easy for me to hold everything in and not share things, which is why I have to practice the opposite now. It's hard for me to come up and ring someone up and say, hey, I'm not really coping. This customer's really stressing me out. I've got a job. I don't know how to do it. I'm really worried. I don't know how to really do it. I'm struggling in my relationship. I don't know how to talk with my wife. I'm struggling, with the fact that, I don't know, I don't love her anymore. I'm struggling with the fact that I don't get to see my kid anymore. They're moving to another country. They're moving to another town. How am I going to see a kid? I'm struggling with the fact I don't feel good enough as a parent. It's hard to admit these things. Everyone has this shit. It's okay. Everyone has this shit. Everyone's shit is slightly different, but everyone has this stuff they go through, and it's so hard to admit it. And you can't necessarily admit it to everyone, but true vulnerability is strength, because it's about finding the right people that I can go, you know what, sometimes I'm scared. Sometimes I get up and feel like an imposter. I'm running a rehab and I was surrounded by people with university degrees, and I don't feel good enough.
So it's okay. So it's not that vulnerability is a strength. It's that.
I think so.
Well, I'm inclined to disagree.
Okay.
So if I articulate it in a different way, so acknowledging your vulnerabilities and communicate them can be empowering.
Yeah.
Because I see vulnerability and weakness as the same thing. Right? A vulnerability is if I've got a vulnerability, right? This talking language I understand. That's an attack vector. Yeah. Okay. Whether that's an emotional vulnerability or a physical vulnerability, a mental vulnerability, a gap in knowledge, gap in experience, whatever. Okay. Now, if I don't acknowledge those things and I don't know, assess them, acknowledge them, bring it to the conscious, address them, okay, either to reduce that vulnerability or to accept it and work out what that means for me, then that sort of magnifies the impact of the vulnerabilities, right? Something happens. So acknowledging the vulnerabilities and acknowledging the vulnerabilities, that's where the strength is.
Yes, okay. I see what you're saying.
Because I've heard this before. Okay? So, the reason I wanted to make this point is I've heard this before from a couple of previous interviews and other things, that vulnerability is strength. And I think that phrase, I think I get what people are trying to say, but it's incorrect and it will rub people up the wrong way, men in particular the wrong way, because I think it's wrong, is the way it's been phrased. It's that acknowledging your vulnerabilities is strength. Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. You know?
And I guess...
everybody has vulnerabilities and everybody has weaknesses.
Being vulnerable, and I'm trying to play this out in my head and try and think and remember we're doing a podcast at the same time. Being vulnerable is accepting your vulnerability. So it's kind of opening yourself up, which I guess in some ways opens yourself up to attack, right? Because I'm going to someone. Quite often we have to do things with other people because it's hard to do by yourself. And there are places like counselors and stuff you can explore this in a confidential setting, right? But okay, so I guess it's easier for me to go out, someone a lot bigger and stronger than you. I'd rather have a fight with you than I would tell you my deepest, darkest secrets, because that's easier, right? It's easier for me to get punched in the face than it is for me to say, you know what, there's a 15-year-old that hated himself and hated school because he didn't feel good looking enough. He didn't feel like he was good with girls. He didn't feel like he was cool enough. You know, that's some deep stuff I used to feel shameful about and very embarrassed about. And I'd feel a lot less vulnerable you punching me in the face than me having an honest conversation with you about that. So I guess embracing our vulnerabilities, I guess what you're saying is true. I haven't had time to properly process it or work it out, but I see the logic in what you're saying. It kind of makes sense. Yeah, the strength is in embracing those parts of us that don't serve us.
You can't do anything about your vulnerabilities for those that come here to be done anything about if you're not consciously acknowledging them.
Yeah, which is denial. You know,
denial.
Yeah, denial. The opposite of denial.
And here's the thing, right? As uncomfortable as it may be, why wouldn't you want to? Okay, so as an individual,
you haven't been taught the value of it. We don't know the strength of it, which is where I think the world is getting better. So I think coming into it's cool to be sober. There's so much more awareness with self-help, self-work, so much more awareness of men's groups, men's work, you know, and women's, looking at yourself, trying to live healthier lives than there was 10 years ago. For all social media's flaws, even especially 15, 20, there are some good things out of social media. I feel a lot more people are starting to look at healthier lives in a way and look up, you know, the access you have to things like this podcast we didn't have 10 years ago, really, to listen to people talk in this way. We just didn't have 10 years ago, let alone 20, 30 years ago. I'm trying to decipher a book. And you know what? You don't like this flavor. Well, first off, I'd say what's wrong with you, but find a different podcast, you know, find someone you do gel with.
Yeah, fuck off.
Yeah. Yeah. You just stop fueling that bit of me that doesn't like me. Okay. But actually, it's okay. Like, now I don't have to get validation from everyone else. That is what being vulnerable has led to. I don't need people's validation today. I'm not going to be there for everyone. Not everyone likes me. And that's okay. And I'm actually quite proud to admit that, because one big thing I have been guilty of is people pleasing, which is bending over backwards to help everyone out, putting other people's needs before my own, time and time again for years, partly because I'm an empath as well, so I feel bad and guilty for everyone and everything. But
is that what an empath is?
I feel everything. So like where we are in Bali, every time I walk down my road, I feel bad for the people just sitting there, which I shouldn't do. You know, and I know they're family of three or four.
What do you mean, the people sitting there? What kind of people?
Walking down our road, like, we've got loads of different buildings. I know there are lots of people, families of 3, families of 4, families of 5, living in a room smaller than my bedroom. You know, it's not my fault. I didn't choose that way, you know, but I can't help but feel bad for them. You know, seeing an advert for people on TV in hospital, I feel bad for them. Hearing stories, feel bad for them. I kind of like overly sensitive to everyone else. I wish I wasn't, but I just feel everything, you know. But yeah, being a people pleaser. So I put everyone's needs before my own. And I found out that came from low self-worth. Because if I help you out, maybe you'll like me, you know. If you've asked, can I cover a shift on Saturday? Well, I had planned Saturday. Okay, I'll do it. Because if I don't do it, you won't like me, or you won't be happy with me, or things like that.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I agree with you. The thing is that a lot of what we do, and the reasons we do a lot of the things we do, that aren't directly for ourselves to put shelter or food over our head, right? Or shelter or food, shelter over our head or food in our bellies. A lot of what we do is because we see it as impacting how the community or the society around us perceives us, or our status in that community.
Prestige.
Which is absolutely critical. You know, rephrase that. It used to be super critical when you had to rely on everyone around you, your tribe, to be able to survive. Yeah, it's less so now. In the same way that in the past, you know, as we were evolving, you know, there were much less emotions, much fewer emotions that men had to deal with, and it was much more important for men to not show vulnerabilities, to not make those public, should we say, because that would severely impact the likelihood of the man attracting a suitable female, any female,
or fighting off partners, rivals.
Yeah, exactly. And the reality is that we're this far down the line now in terms of evolution. We've evolved so fucking quickly over the last few hundred years.
But we haven't. We've changed, but we haven't evolved to keep up.
Exactly. The world has evolved so quickly, and our brains have not evolved as quickly enough to adapt to it, which is why I think, especially over the last 10, 15 years, you know, there's such an increase in mental health related illnesses or conditions, you know, a ramp up in it. And yeah, you can say in certain things, okay, well, that's because we're better at identifying them. You know, we're more we have more precise ways of assessing people and measuring these things and then treating them. Yeah, that's part of it. But also because the world's changed so rapidly in the last 15 years. We just bombarded, and our brains are struggle to cope with it. I think
there's so much to go on that. So many different aspects, from instincts to that. I saw an interesting study. I can't remember where it was, but it made perfect sense. As countries get richer, their mental health spirals like drastically decreases as the wealth of a country goes up. Poorer countries, have much worse physical health. So our physical health improves. We've got a lot better access to medication, hospitals, etc. So our life expectancy, our physical health increases greatly as a country's wealth increases. Its mental health decreases greatly. And countries, third world countries, other countries, suffer less from mental health problems.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's because we have the luxury of being mentally unwell. So there's a thing called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Starts on the bottom. Need, I don't remember all of it, need for food, shelter.
Food and shelter, yeah.
Need to get our psychological needs met. And it goes up, and the final one is self-actualization, which is where you can basically chase being the best version of self. Come down a bit. So people say that are literally working to eat. They're just working to cover rent and eat. They haven't got the luxury to be depressed. You know, if you have to go out and work in a field for 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, you haven't got time to be depressed. You have to be out there, which can be helpful in a way, being distracted and busy and, you know, focus on stuff. You also, in some ways, aren't caught in the rat race. If everyone around you is kind of poor, there's a thing I like to call compare and despair. So like, look at my neighbor. We like to compare and despair the things we haven't got more so than the ways we're better than people. So I look at my neighbor, he's got a nicer car than me. You know, I don't actually know anything else about him. It might be completely financed for all I know, but he's got a nicer car than me. Look, you're in better shape than me. You know, you've got bigger muscles than me. Compare and despair. Geez, that person's got a better job than me. And I think in materialism, we really get stuck in that.
It's choice and opportunity, isn't it? Yeah, I get what you're saying. A great example of that is, like nowadays in a first world country like the UK, is you look at a single mother or a single parent, father or mother, right, but more commonly a mother, a single mother with multiple children, with multiple jobs, because she has to have multiple jobs to care for the multiple children for whatever the circumstances are, right? And, you know, yeah, state benefits and whatever else, but they just get on with it. It's like, just get on with it. They get through life. You think, man, if there was sort of a different circumstance and this was like, this is like an optional situation that you're into, people will just crumble. But because there's no choice there, the mother has to. It is ingrained in her. She has to care for the children. It isn't a conscious decision. She hasn't got a choice. Her brain and her body and everything the genetics says you care for the children. Those children must grow up and survive, and they must be adults. You know, because that's how we've evolved to where we are now, right? Because of the, you know, obviously men do good things too, but the mother, it's within her, and she will do everything she has to do to ensure that's the case. And the hours that those mums will work, again, or fathers, mums will work, the lack of sleep they get, the physical and mental hardships they put themselves through. And a lot of them won't grumble. They won't get ill. You know, maybe they'll die younger deaths later on, at a younger age later on, because they've had to endure this on their own. But the point is, at that moment in time, they're getting through that because they haven't got a fucking choice. You know, there's no alternative. This has to be done, and you'll do whatever you need to do to get through it. You know, like people poverty-stricken or people who live in the Amazon jungle, tribes that have been rarely contacted by people, and they just have this existence. They don't have mental ill health. They don't have mental ill health. Well, very rare occurrences of it because they don't have the bandwidth for it. They don't have the distractions. They don't have these options to make bad choices for themselves. They've got what they need to do, and every one of them is an integral piece of that community. They all have a role to play, and if they don't play that role very well, it really impacts the community around them. So they no choice but to do what needs to be done. They don't know anything else, you know. And the reality is, these days, you can be a fucking nightmare in society and get away with it because it has a fractional impact in the society around you.
Yeah.
I mean, society in general.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, immediate family, immediate friends, problem.
And them. Yeah, they get away with it, I'd say. They don't get away with it. because they suffer from all those ill health things. Yeah, that's why I'm not a big fan of the benefit system for a lot of people. Not so much for people who genuinely need benefits, but some of the structure where people, and it doesn't serve them, because why, in some ways, why would you work if you're going to earn less than if you're just on benefits? But there's so much value in working.
There is a problem with it here in the UK, and it's something I noticed over the last 10 years with people close to me. There is a problem where there is a status a situation can be in, which is super common, right? Where it is more beneficial for you to be on state benefits and work part-time and keep your part-time earnings under a certain threshold than it is to get off state benefit and go full-time in a job. And in fact, to make the step to get off the benefits to go full-time and be totally off benefits, you're actually worse off financially. You lose money in the short term unless that jump up unless you're going to get a crazy big increase in your pay. Let's say you're a cleaner, or let's say you're doing some, I don't know, labourer, whatever, right? And then in order to get off benefits, your salary or your basically monthly or annual income, it needs to jump to in a level that is much higher than what would just be a natural progression up the ladder of promotion or stepping from a part-time career into a full-time career. You end up earning less. The state benefit system here is designed in a way, whether intentionally or not, is designed in a way to make it very difficult. It's very difficult to get off benefits, which is really bad. I know people who are on benefits and literally want to get off it, but it doesn't make financial sense.
Exactly.
And they've got dependents. They're going to lose $4 or $5 a year if they get off benefits and go full time.
And then they're depriving their dependents, their kids. Yeah. And I think it's sad because stuff like that helps promote bad ill health. There's so much value in working, being responsible, being healthily tired, having more connection, having more self-worth. And there's so many values in working.
Are you too hot?
I think we kind of deprive. No, I'm
okay. So you've only sleep.
Yeah.
Get your long johns back on.
And I think we kind of deprive people. It must hinder the mental health of society to a degree, because I know actually the benefits. A lot of people argue about the money compared to what we spend in a year in the budget. It's a tiny drop in the ocean.
Is it?
Financially, it's not a lot compared to the amount a country spends, right?
What astounds me with it is where I live, there's people around, I live in like a cul-de-sac. There's people there who live and they're on benefits completely, and they don't work. And I know they don't work because I know their habits, right? It astounds me that they can afford cigarettes. Chain smokers outside their front door all the time smoking. It's like take 20 quid for a pack of cigarettes,
Oh, it's crazy,
I don't get it. How are you affording that? And it's, again, the state benefit system. It begs the question, this is not begs the question. It's not being put to best use.
No.
How can that be good for society or the country or for those individuals? To be able to live like that.
Yeah, surely. So to give the example you said, where someone works part-time or full-time, they'd be worse off. Surely then a better solution would be, all right, you work full-time and we'll top you up to the same amount. Because regardless of, okay, that would save that case a bit of money for the government. But even if it didn't save a bit of money, the health benefits, the mental health benefits of them working and being in employment and contributing, would be so much better than
so
just
as an incentive to get off benefits.
Well, or change it. So maybe not get off, because if they can't afford to live on that salary, you could argue the cost of living crisis, something's desperately wrong.
Yeah, because more often than not, to make that leap, it requires training, upskilling, and people who are working part-time and on benefits, that can argue they haven't got the money for courses and stuff like that. Or they don't know what to do, or they haven't got the time to do it. It's just, over the last 10 years, I've seen this a particular situation. It's so frustrating. So for people who want to get up a ladder, and the system is so prohibitive for it. And I think that's a situation a lot of people don't realize. A lot of people look at people on benefits and they look at them really negatively in a real negative way. And yes, there are a shitload of people who are claiming benefits when they absolutely don't need to be, or they're claiming benefits fraudulently, But there are so many where it is just not. It does not make sense to get off benefits. Does not make sense at all. I mean, they're on benefits legitimately.
Yeah.
But it does not make sense to get off it. There's no... The risk is too high. The risk is too high.
Well, you're going to deprive your children.
Yeah.
That just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Hold them back just so you can have a job. Yeah. So the system is a bit wonky.
Yeah.
It needs adjustment for them, for their well-being more than anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Howard, we're back. Okay, yes. I say Howard, but we're back. Listeners, viewers, we're back with a minor technical... It wasn't an issue.
Storage.
We averted it before it was an issue. Yeah, storage issue. But okay, can we... All right, so can we come back to yourself and Scott? And 6 months on from meeting in recovery after you disliked him because he was now took the limelight off you. He was 10 days dry, 10 days sober. 6 months down the line. So how did it evolve from there? Because Bali Beginnings was his idea, was it?
Yeah, even before then there was another iteration, Safar Recovery. So he really loved Africa. He really loved Australia. Spent 10 years living in Australia. So
he was British though, Scott, was he?
Yes. Yeah. He wanted to do Safar Recovery, which was rehab in Africa in safari resorts, but he wasn't able to get it going. It takes quite a lot to start a rehab.
Sounds expensive to set up.
Oh yeah. And you need a lot of knowledge, a lot of skills. We have over 40 staff now, so for 6 clients, quite a comprehensive team. Although we have gone leaps from the initial vision. So yeah, we just started hanging about, partly because our birthdays were close together. Our sober date was close together. We clicked, we gelled, we both got a stupid sense of humour. He's a bit older than me, so he was 42 when he died. That was 7 years ago now, so he'd be 49, so he'd be 10 years older than me. Yeah, I guess we just gelled over stupid sense of humour more than anything else, and both love for recovery and a love for helping people. We both did loads of volunteering, loads of trying to help people in the community.
What strand of psychology was he into, and how was he? Was he academic? Was he a psychologist?
No, he was a counselling psychologist.
Oh, was he? Okay.
So actually used to counsel people.
Oh, I think you mentioned that earlier, actually, when counselling.
Yeah, I don't know if I did or not, but yeah, he also worked in facilities management. So he randomly ended up running a lot of facilities. I don't quite know how, I never asked him. But when I did finally meet him, he was running South Bucks Hospice in their 11 shops. So quite a big facility manager. And then he eventually went on as he got more sober. I don't know if they knew about his sobriety, but that's one thing. He ended up doing some counselling there as well with some of the people that were dying and things like that, and leaning more into the stuff he enjoyed more so. And it just seemed like such a good fit. When he eventually approached me, went back to Australia to do what we call making amends, clearing the wreckage of the past, so putting right things you'd let down, repaying debts you have.
He went back to do that.
He did that, yeah.
You went with him?
No, I didn't, but I've done my own version here, clearing some of the wreckage. He eventually ended up in Bali. Bali's like Spain. If you're from Australia, it's like a quick jaunt over to Spain.
Bit better than Spain, I'd argue. little bit better than Spain.
No comment. Yeah. I like it. Yeah, it's different.
I've never been.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Okay.
So he ended up out there. We were just over 3 years sober, and eventually he decided he was going to try and set up a rehab out there, which is when he approached me looking, for some money because he knew I knew a bit about business. And yeah, I liked the project. I've been volunteering for years. I was really passionate about it, really passionate about helping people.
So how many years after knowing him was that then? Or meeting him?
That was 2017, so 5 years sober. We were 5 years sober. 2016 we started the project, and it took 18 months to put everything together before we were ready to open with facility and everything.
How did going sober impact your immediate circle of what would then have been your friends and obviously your family?
Yeah,
That's the piece that puts a lot of people off.
Yeah, and interestingly, it partly depends on your circle. All my friends are heavy drinkers and users. You could argue a lot of them are alcoholics, probably, certainly getting a lot of trouble. One of my best friends is now 6 years sober, so he definitely was. I'd argue a lot others probably are, and they probably know it as well. I didn't stop hanging about with them, interestingly, so much. I did a little bit for a while. I was 25 years old when I came into recovery. It's getting better, but there weren't many younger people. Everyone used to say, "Oh, it's great, you got it so young." And I used to think, "Oh, fucking great." 25 years old and sat in some church hall. Like, yeah, a lot of recovery groups are in places like church halls because they're cheap rent, not because it's religious or anything. But yeah, great, sat in some community centre with a bunch of 50 and 60-year-olds. Fucking whoop-de-doo. And there were a couple of young people in recovery with me, and we had this little group, and then within a month they had all relapsed, and it was just me. So I didn't really want to stop that side of me. And I guess that's part of the problem I had when I was stuck in my room at home. There was no life. So I just locked myself in for 2 years, trying not to get in trouble. I had no life. So I don't really know how it came about, but I started hanging around. I go to a support group on a Friday night, and then I go out to the pub, but I go with some people who I knew wouldn't let me drink, and we'd just shoot some pool and chat all night, and I wouldn't drink. It wasn't really a big problem for me. But I did also, the rest of the time, lean in heavily to the groups and the people. So that became kind of my network, like people like Scott. We'd go out for meals, we'd meet up for coffee, we'd do normal things, we'd go out to bowling or something like that and kind of do normal things, functioning as normal people, but with people you're safe around and without the consequences. And actually that's also, we kind of encourage it in the rehab now. We do stuff like on a Friday night, we take all the clients out for a meal after a support group. And it's nice, like, it's not about alcohol, it's not about the drugs for one night. It's just like you're a normal person. It's almost like you're not in rehab. We go out, sometimes there's 7-8 people from the support group. We go out on Friday night to this great place that sells either like Turkish or like pizzas, things like that. And we all sit around a big table, kind of like the table the cameras can't see in front of us, and just have a laugh and talk about anything. So I remember last time I went out, we were having a laugh at one of the recovery coaches because she doesn't like Christmas songs. So calling her the Christmas Grinch, and then talking about Christmas movies. Yeah.
There's some childhood trauma wrapped up in that. My God.
There may be. And we should have discussed that. And just shooting the shit, so to speak, like normal people, having normal conversations, going out for a big meal. Half the table's laughing down there, half's laughing down here. Just doing normal things like normal people without the alcohol. And it's more about giving them a taste on, look, you can do normal stuff. Giving up alcohol or drugs isn't meant to shut your life off. Okay, you may need to shut some bits off if they're short term. So if your network, like me, is big drinking, it is recommended. You don't do what I do, it is recommended. You kind of avoid them for a while till you feel safe enough to hang out with them. But look, there are other things that, it doesn't have to be them. Connect with support groups. There are other things. I know people that are really got into running, have runners groups, and it's not so much about the running, it's more about the community. He feels, hangs out with like-minded people who just want to do the right thing. So we specifically take people out to kind of give them a taste of, look, this isn't meant to shut life off. This is meant to open life up and allow you to do all the things that you want to do without the consequences.
Yeah, there's a lot of habits that come with the culture of alcohol. Like you're in the UK, for example, where those habits bring beneficial things, and not everyone becomes a goddamn alcoholic. How many I know so many old guys who go to the pub religiously, day in, day out. Like back home in Wales, where when I was growing up, there was the miners welfare club, and they were in every little village in the valleys. And in our little village, Crynant Miners Welfare Club, the old boys would go there. They were going there from midday or as soon as it opened, and they'd be there as soon as it closed, daily, religiously, day in, day out. Most of them, they'd be drinking throughout the whole day, 2 or 3 pints. You see how slow some people can drink bitter in those places. You see it in Wetherspoons these days as well. Those places that are open really early, we can get alcohol really early. The guys in there, they'll drink 2 or 3 pints throughout the day, and that's it. They're not there for the alcohol.
Yeah.
They're there to go to a familiar place. They're there for that community thing they had when they're growing up. Go in and meet up with their friends and shoot the shit and just be in their environment outside of the house, away from, a distraction maybe.
Yeah.
And alcohol is sold there. And it's a drinking place, but then for some people that doesn't work out very well. I kind of get it. It's like, and the same with, if all the people best, your circle of friends who you used to go drinking with, you go on the piss with them. You also know them best and they know you better. Things like there's a history of knowledge there that enables the banter, the joking, the camaraderie, all that stuff that comes with it. And a lot of it is superficial at that level. When you're going on the piss and it's sort of, okay, is this real friendship? Is this, or is it just this thing that happens to be going alongside my alcohol? But that makes it harder to step away from as well, right?
It does. In some ways, I was lucky and I guess unlucky. Lucky. So let me explain that. I was lucky and unlucky. All my drinking buddies are true friends. We'd do anything. We're like brothers. Unlucky in the fact that I guess wasn't easy to step away from them. Didn't want to. Whereas if, you got some questionable pub mates, I imagine it's probably easier to let go of them. I don't know, unless you don't have anyone else interesting. But I guess I was lucky because I know to my core, they are true friends. They may be dysfunctional. They may let me down sometimes the same way I let other people down, which I don't judge because I did exactly the same. But I know, we are there for each other. We always have been there for each other and helped each other out over years and years, So, which I guess is lucky. It also made it hard, because it makes it hard now to see some of them certainly doing what they're doing and knowing I have a solution, but they don't want it for whatever reason. They're still getting what they need or want from alcohol, and they're not ready to take a solution that's right in front of them, but have no control over that, unfortunately. Prime example is my mum and my uncle. My uncle needed recovery and my mum wanted it. And my uncle died bright yellow, drinking alcohol through the same straw he ate through by the end. And, liver failure, kidney failure. My mum wasn't that bad, but she wanted recovery. So, Yeah, needing it's not enough for whatever reason. There's a little tangent there.
No, it's fine. I think when I was growing up, my father used to say that you can count you can probably count your true friends on one hand, and I sort of never really knew what he meant. I kind of thought I knew, and then kind of didn't. And then as I got older, I always I heard from others, okay, you can count your true friends on your close friends on those who, if you rang them up, like best friend, those if you rang them up, so I need you right now. I can't explain it to you. I need you to get to me and come and help me. Now, regardless of where they are and they will know what they're doing, they would come, drop everything and come. They would trust you implicitly and come. And yeah, I say you could say that. I'd say it now as well. Oh, you can count your true friends on, if you turned around and said to them, never buy me a pint, never offer me a pint again, never buy me a line, never offer me cocaine ever again. If you said that out of the blue and you were deadly serious, they're the ones who wouldn't ever. They wouldn't ever, because they would understand they may not understand why, but they understand the seriousness and the conviction with which you're saying it, and they wouldn't do it because they're the ones you can trust then to go to the pub with. If you can trust yourself not to go to the bar yourself and buy a pint, they're the ones you can trust, and I think they're the true friends. And to be honest, how many of those do people have? Because everyone needs those people. Not necessarily to not buy you a pint or not whatever, but they need those people in your life because hard times are going to come, and they're also the people who. I'm very fortunate now, and I'm sure you are too, to have people where I can be open and honest about what I'm feeling and how I'm feeling. And similarly, if I ask them, I know I'm going to get an honest response back. How are you feeling? What's going on? How's life? And you're going to get an honest answer, an honest response back. Or I could offer up something I'm not okay with, put within me, and be able to have an actual conversation about it. Maybe not in depth because they don't have their own experience, but enough to make me feel a little bit better about myself or understand myself a little bit more, or just to air what I'm feeling. Because a lot of times just expressing something openly, outwardly, that can help to lessen the burden which you are feeling. There are some things. There are some things you definitely know. There are some things that absolutely nothing outside of you, like no external thing, can help you with that load or understand that load any more than you already do. But simply by expressing it can lighten the burden on yourself.
There's a saying, we're as sick as our secrets, because kind of what we don't share can eat away at us. And the other saying is, a problem shared is a problem halved. These sayings work because it's true. It's not like people are just making things up and trying to throw shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. It's true. It's proven when we share something with someone, it kind of eases the burden. And, we don't have to do it alone. That's, I guess, where support groups can be good, particularly if they're support groups for things you've all been through. So there's loads, mine's alcohol and drugs. There's things like support groups for armies. There's things like support groups for survivors of sexual assault or whatever it may be. And sharing something in a space is pretty safe because these people have been through the same thing as you, and there's some level of understanding, at least a lot more than out there. Your experiences may not be exactly the same, but another paratrooper is going to understand what it's like to be in live conflict a lot more than, well, infinitely more than me is. They may not have been in the same conflict, but they've been through the same things, even if it's as little as they've lived the same army lifestyle as you. Same with sexual abuse, for instance. Sexual abuse survivor will understand. So things I learned running a rehab, we don't give the clients hugs, for instance, unless there's perhaps an extreme situation. We might ask permission. Hey, is it okay if I give you a hug? And even then, that'd be in a public space, ideally where other people are present, certainly not in one of their rooms alone, because you don't know, by trying to do an innocent thing, they're crying because they haven't spoken to their child for 2 years because they're drinking. I give them a hug, triggers, an instance of them being abused. I don't know to be aware about that until working at the rehab. Whereas, gone on a long tangent there, other survivors of sexual abuse may understand how triggering it is to be hugged. I'm speaking predominantly about women here, to be hugged by a random male who might have the right intentions but might unintentionally trigger something they don't mean to. So there's that kind of commonality where you can talk through stuff that only you guys get to the extent you get. Like you spoke earlier about normal people, you wish normal people could have addiction for a day without consequence, so they could know what it's like. No one else can understand what it's like to live it, and the insanity of, why do I keep doing something I don't want to fucking do? I really don't want to do this. Every part of me doesn't want to do this. I wake up every day saying I'm not going to do this, and yet I do it again, and it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't have to make sense because it is just the way it is.
Since Bali, in all the time Bali Beginnings has been operating, since you started up, is there anything that you've seen or learned during the everything it does that you thought that has surprised you and you hadn't known before, like insights into addiction, people, personalities?
More than I could even begin to grasp. I love it. So I'm looking at maybe doing a psychology master's now. And I was speaking to a guy the other day, like a guy that business coached us, actually helped us a lot after Scott died. And I sent him, but I don't know if I want to do it because it's not really going to help my career. It's not really going to help the rehab. You know, we got psychologists on the team. Is it ego? Do I want to do it just so I got this name? And I'm quizzing it with him. And he said, well, why do you want to do it? And I said, to be honest, I just want to learn more. And he said, well, that sounds like a bloody good reason to do it. Actually, I'm kind of scared, believe it or not, scared of doing a degree. You know, I'm comfortable on building sites. I'm comfortable working with my hands. I'm not comfortable for studying for 3 years. I wasn't comfortable doing my counselling degree, but, you know, I managed that. So, but what about more?
You did a degree in counselling?
Well, I don't know H&D, so I think it's a diploma. I don't know
it's like
all
a
the
level
difference.
5, is it not? That's quite high.
I don't know all the difference.
Yeah,
with
H&D is a diploma.
Things.
I was reason I was
15
surprised
years
at
of building sites. Yeah.
20, yeah, that's a diploma.
Maybe
Level
20.
5. Yeah, big qualification. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I just know it was terrifying for me. There was so I have one thing I learned, and I wrote about this in one of my final pieces. I have what's called a self-limiting belief. So I told myself for the best part of 20 years, I can't read, I can't write, and I said it so many times it became true.
Did you actually have reading and writing problems?
I'm dyslexic, yeah, and I struggle with reading and writing. The truth is as well, I hadn't practiced for 20 years, and I dropped out of school at every stage writing was involved. So dropped out of sixth form when we had to do assignments I hadn't done. Probably weed didn't help. Dropped out of college when we had to do assignments. I hadn't done them. Dropped out of university, which lasted like 2 months when the first assignment was due and I hadn't done it. It's a pattern here. And I think part of it was laziness and, you know, being caught up in drinking and smoking and not sitting doing things that would help me. But, you know, there's a philosopher, I think his name was Nietzsche. He said, if you say you can, or you say you can't, you are right. And what it means is basically what you say is true. And I told myself for years, can't read, can't write. Ignore the fact that I hadn't actually practiced, you know, or tried, you know, be like me picking up a guitar and saying I can't play guitar. Well, of course you freaking can't. You haven't tried, you know. But I just had this mantra, I'm dyslexic, I can't read, I can't write, I struggle to read, I struggle to write. I literally sit there, I told myself this so much. It stopped me doing a psychology degree for 10 years. I wanted to do one ever since I got sober, but I was so fearful I wouldn't be good enough, I just didn't do it. I stick in my lane being a builder. It wasn't until COVID that I actually did it. It took the pandemic to do it, and my wife doing it that really kind of gave me the push.
You
can't prove anything.
It started in Bali, not in Wuhan. It was in Bali. Right.
Yeah, that's a batty comment. Don't listen. Yeah. So yeah, there was this running joke. Like I'm not just going to say to me, I'm pretty good at counselling. Like we have to do a lot of training counselling. In counselling, other people always shared I was pretty good. I'm pretty good at listening. Helped I spent 10 years volunteering, right? So in recovery groups, so basically doing a lot of similar stuff. So I kind of had a head start, I guess. But there was this running joke that like, I'm going to be no good at assignments. It was like a running joke in the class. And honestly, when I had to do my first assignment, I had such panic. My wife had to rub my chest while I sat and wrote it, and it was atrocious.
While you wrote it?
Yeah, for a bit, like, because I got myself panicked. For 20 years, I told myself I can't do this, and suddenly I have to do it. For 20 years, I told myself I'm no good.
What were you like at the end of it?
By the end, I could do it. It was passable. It's not going to win any awards, but I did it. It was passable. When I
well, the assignments are just a demonstration of knowledge, right? You don't have to be Shakespeare.
To a degree, yeah. And a lot of it in counselling is learning about yourself and working, because you can't heal other people if you're kind of unhinged or more so. So a lot is about growing yourself as well, which is great because I wrote a lot about that. I read it actually with our clinical director and psychologist Simone and one of our lead support workers, Jess. Not long ago, I was reading bits of it and it wasn't amazing, but actually I was impressed with how much I did learn. And the biggest thing I learned over it was I can do some things. I just told myself for so long that I couldn't, that I started to believe it. There's, I think I'm mixing sayings here. I thought of a really good one, but there's an old saying, and it's funny because I think this way with the rehab, but not with assignments. If you aim if you aim low, the worst thing that could happen is you hit it.
I've heard
Whereas
this,
if you aim high, the other saying is aim for the moon.
Finish off the first saying.
Yeah.
Oh, is this okay? Right.
No, well, this is a different saying. So if you aim for the moon and you fall short, then you'll land amongst the stars, which is apt for where we're at,
Yeah.
But if you aim at the top and you fall short, then that's not a bad place to be. But if you aim down here, you might hit it, and that's a bad thing. And so I've always had this kind of philosophy with the rehab, and with some things I'm fearless, almost stupidly fearless. Even when it's cost me everything, still gone in with this unreal belief and desire. But yet when it came to writing some assignments, I was the hyper opposite. So fearful, so held back by fear. Yeah.
It's crazy that the mind can do to you. What the mind can convince you of. Absolutely crazy. A weird and wonderful piece of equipment in our craniums. We've got about 5 minutes or so left. I asked you earlier, but you were mid-flow, so instead we come back to it. You said that in the first year of Bali Beginnings operating, you got invited to give a talk, like an industry talk on ethics. I think you mentioned a TED talk at some point as well. So
that wasn't me, but
no, it was someone else. Yeah, but so why is Bali Beginnings being seen to be a leader, maybe an industry leader in some?
We are now an outcome.
Why is that?
Definitely.
What are you doing?
What we are doing particularly, other than we have a really strong program, really strong team, high levels of staffing to clients. So Asia's biggest rehab has 60 beds and 60 staff. We have 6 beds and 40 staff. So
Asia's has what? So Asia's biggest one?
Asia's biggest rehab
has
60 beds.
Yeah.
And 60 staff.
60, and you've got 60-40.
640. So we're a highly diverse team, and by diverse, we do have diverse religious countries, cultures, but I mean in terms of we have, psychiatrists, fantastic psychologists who understand addiction, which is really hard to find. We have a load of great addicts who understand addiction.
Psychologists who understand addiction are hard to find.
In my experience, because they have a lot of times the medical profession can have the same misconceptions as normal people. If you haven't lived it, it doesn't make sense.
Example of a misconception, common misconception.
So, well, why can't you just quit? What's wrong with
classic.
you?
Thanks.
Why didn't anyone tell me this 6 years ago? I would have just fucking quit.
That's the answer.
Yeah. So, but getting ones that understand the nuances and stuck in this cycle, it's surprisingly hard to find because it doesn't make sense. A lot of addiction doesn't make sense. Why? If I lean on a stove and burn my hand, I don't put my hand on that stove. But when it comes to alcohol, I'll hold it there till I have no skin left on my hands. And then the next day I'll put it back again. Doesn't make sense. Nothing about it is logical. But I'm digressing. So the big thing we do now is our aftercare. We have and this is what started it. We have an 11-month aftercare. So when people leave us, they do 28 days in treatment in Indonesia. We have 11-month aftercare where if people want or need, they can connect to us 4 to 5 times a week for 11 months. We got groups, got some one-to-ones that ramp down with the psychologist, some peer support, some support workers, as well as an emergency session. So people can also book emergency sessions with our psychologist once a week. So and we think that's why our outcomes now, our relapse rate is less than 20% and the average is 80. Yeah, so we're like 4 times less than the average.
That's unbelievable, to be fair.
It's not the be all and end all, because if you're just going to get sober and your life isn't getting better, then what's the point? Because sooner or later you will resort to picking up. What we really
sober
do well
but
is
miserable.
Is
no good.
What's the point? If you haven't changed your external circumstances or you're not working on it, you will revert to type, because you're going to be left with the same unhappiness, perhaps the same loneliness, same lack of fulfillment, same negative circles. Haven't worked on this dysfunctional relationship you're in, haven't worked on the fact that you feel guilty about not seeing your kids enough, whatever it may be. You have to work on it. You have to change. Being sober isn't enough. Being sober will not give you the life you want. If people are just sober, sooner or later they will revert to type. The key is, how can we get them changing their life? How can we get them changing their circles or improving their circles, their connection with people, their health, their well-being? Do you want a different career? Do you want to progress? Are you happy? Which is fine. What is your purpose? Is your purpose to be a better parent? Is your purpose to make more friends? Is your purpose to change careers? Is it just to progress? Helping people connect with meaningful lives and change. I think that's the biggest thing. Someone said we got a testimonial coming out. They can tell every single member of our team cares, and we really do. I think that's the biggest thing I've learned. We have a fantastic program, but the best program in the world doesn't count for shit if you can't get people to connect to it. How do you get people to connect to the program? Through the environment and through the staffing. So I always use the example, you could have 100% perfect program, but if you can only get people to commit 10%, they'll only get 10% out of it. Whereas, and this is made up numbers, if you could have a program that's 50%, so half as good, but you can get people to engage in it 50%, they're going to get 25% in it. So how you get people to engage is more important than the program itself. How you get people to turn up and commit and listen and learn and want to change their life is the far more important aspect of it, which is what we really focus on. Other things are we're really boundaried. We allow people access to their devices, phones, generally 1 hour a day. And there's lots of good therapeutic because we want them engaging with each other. We want them connecting. We don't want them isolating in their room. We don't want them distracted. Imagine you're about to go into an education group and you get an email from a frustrated customer. How much attention are you going to pay to that education group? You're just not. You're going to spend the whole hour thinking about this email. Same with relationship emails, or maybe an email from your kids or whatever. So we're really boundaried about things, boundaries. People don't realize how much structure some people are missing, and routine and boundaries, and having that really helps.
And the ability to commit themselves to some introspection.
Yeah.
It's a huge thing. I think it's one of the biggest things that, to be honest, the podcast has benefited me in a way like this, from speaking to people like yourself and others. It's the value of introspection. It's the value of looking into yourself and trying to understand why you feel the way you feel, or why you think what you think. Hugely valuable. And people these days have less and less opportunity to do so. They allow themselves less and less opportunity to do so because there are so many things that are a distraction. And I've spoken that, so much about this. Phones being a prime example. Such a lack of awareness of why we are who we are. And I think that goes a long way to, creating the situations we're in. We spoke about earlier, mental health and addictions and things like this, and trying to overcome addiction and living better lives afterwards. You made a really good point earlier. It's like, what is the point? What is the point of being a recovering alcoholic, a recovering drug addict, a recovering whatever, if you're doing it but miserable in it? Because it's hugely valuable, and you should be proud of yourself for getting through that adversity, which many people do not do, and they're in the 12 foot under because of it. So we're out of time, but how can people follow what you are doing, what Bali Beginnings are doing, and how can they connect with you if that's okay?
Rehabbali.com.
Rehabbali.com.
IHABBALI.com. Follow us on social media. You'll find us from our website, no doubt. So, yeah, and we're going to be working on, in the new year, a lot of tips and tricks, mental health. So from everything, how do I start a healthy conversation about something my partner doesn't like, all the way to topics like compare and despair. How do I change my thinking around compare and despair, and a bunch of things like that.
Amazing. When you were next over in the UK, I'd be very happy if you could grace me with your presence again for a part 2.
Oh yeah, it would be a pleasure.
Been awesome, mate. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers, buddy.